Perfect. Thank you, Kylie. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening to the regular session of council for the town of Greater Napanee for the 6th day of June, 2023. Just before I get started, I'd just like to remind everyone that this evening's meeting will be recorded and live streamed to the town of Greater Napanee YouTube channel. Having said that, we'll look for a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended with the change to go into the motion to go into closed session. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. Any further comment, questions or concerns? All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Up first will be presentations, and we have a pre-budget presentation, future facility funding requirements, and I believe that presentation will be done by Nicole Davidson and Chris Brown. Come on up, folks. Good evening, Nicole and Chris. When you're ready, go ahead.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So this presentation is meant to act as a preview for what's to come as we prepare for next year's budget. Nicole and I will be talking about the importance of budgeting for facility capital improvements and planning ahead to ensure that future cash flows are stable. This will allow us to invest in our facilities year after year and stay current with our building maintenance. Last year, we completed our building condition assessments of each facility. The building conditions assessments are intended to provide documentation on the present condition of the existing property elements of the development with respect to capital repairs, replacements, upgrades, and renovations required over the next 30 years. After a thorough review of all recommendations in the first decade, staff have narrowed the scope to what we consider top priority projects to lower that average yearly financial impact. On page 2, you can see that we are focusing on the next 5 years. I will note that the costs are estimates and they're based on industry standards provided in the building condition assessment. As we look 5 years down the road, we can see that approximately $1 million per year is required for us to fund these capital improvements. I will talk about a little bit more on page 3. I've just added a little bit more context to each priority for next year, 2024. So when looking at the priorities, I did list them 1 through 9, but really these are interchangeable. They are all priorities for us next year. Just going down the list at the Strathcona Paper Center, we need a new condenser for the refrigeration plant. The building is going to be 20 years old next year, which is hard to believe. We also want to put in a new swing gate on the Goodyear rink. We are in the process of right now of putting in a new swing gate on the Home Hardware rink. We were going to do lift gates, which are actually more expensive, but we did run into a number of reasons why we are going to go with the swing gate. The main one was making sure that we could get trucks and equipment through the opening out onto the surface for not only cleaning and taking out the ice when the season is over, but things like concerts or home shows where the trucks have to get through. The new design for the lift gate was only offering about a 9-foot clearance, height clearance. So we made the change. There were a few other things that swayed our decision, but we decided to go with a swing gate on Home Hardware. That will give us, a full year to weigh the pros and cons before we make that decision on Goodyear rink. But we feel that that is going to be the new way. A lot of the newer rinks, especially twin pads, are going to the swing gate for those very reasons. Town Hall, we've got in there $70,000. This is to make sure that we are able to move forward with this building. We have budgeted $100,000 this year. We're using that money to leverage more money through government funding. If we're not successful in those grants, we want to make sure that we have $170,000 next year to go ahead and improve the exterior of this building, some landscaping to the back and to the front, and continue with our interior repairs as well. There are a few different roofing projects in here. The next one is replacing the shingles on the salt dome on the Public Works yard. We do want to do a full assessment on that building because there are some structural components inside that we want to make sure are going to hold the new shingles. So there might be some additional costs as we assess that building. Strathcona Paper Center, we had this in there as potential to do this year, but we didn't, but we want to keep it in there. The home hardware rink, the rubber flooring all along the hallway by the dressing rooms is starting to show its age. We'd like to replace that front to back of the arena plus 2 dressing rooms on that side. The Dorland Fire Hall right now is burning oil still. We'd like to put in a couple high efficiency propane furnaces at the Dorland Fire Hall, one in the garage bay, obviously, and then the other one in the hall. North Fred Hall, we've made some good repairs in that building of late, and it's starting to get lots and lots of use. We've been tracking participation in that building. We'd like to replace the vinyl tile that goes from the front lobby all the way back through the hallway and the public washrooms. And there's also a meeting room at the back with all carpet flooring. We'd like to put something a little bit easier to maintain in there, like a vinyl plank or something like that, replace the flooring there. Then getting into South Fred and the community hall and the garage, we know this came before council before. We know we have to replace the roof on both of those buildings. I will say that the $400,000 price tag is the report that has been shared before. That is the Cadillac roof. That is the one that has a 30-year warranty. That is top notch. There are cheaper options for that roof, and we can continue to investigate cheaper options with that as well. So that brings us to just over $1 million for those 9 projects that we deem a priority heading into 2024. Up over to the next page. I just wanted to shed some light. We have lots of work to do to bring back more specific pricing for council on these projects. But when you do a building condition assessment, some of these things get forgotten about. And I just didn't want to let them slip anyone's mind. We want to look at the removal of Parks washroom buildings at Sherman's Point Boat Launch, Brooks Ferry Landing, and Conservation Park. 2 of those buildings have not been operational for years at Sherman's Point and Brooks Ferry Landing. They are damaged, they're beyond repair. There's graffiti on them, and they're quite frankly an eyesore at those locations. Conservation Park washroom, I'm sure we've all been in it. It is a concrete block building. It's been hit with a lot of vandalism over the years, and it's getting to the point where we need to look at replacing it with something newer and better and safer. It is still operational. It's open now, but each and every year it gets harder and harder to maintain that building, keep up with the vandalism. And so we're recommending that if we take that down, we can look at different strategies to replace it, or look at other options. The next thing on my list is a sports turf maintenance program. This is something that I've been trying to work on over the years. This would be to make sure that all of our soccer pitches and our outfields at our softball diamonds are hit with an annual maintenance program, including fertilizer, aerating, top dress, overseed, all those good things, to make sure that our sports turf is high end and is welcoming to all users. We don't want to treat our sports fields like any other, just open park space grass. We want to treat that a little differently. The main thing that I would want to do first with this program would be to sort of retrofit the SPC soccer field. It's in rough shape over the years. It's sunk down in spots. It's rough. The Greater Napanee Soccer Club is not actually playing on it at all. And that's a shame. And we need to do something to improve that facility. It already has lights. It already has water out to the small building there that you see on the pitch. So you would start with an irrigation system, and then you would rebuild the turf on top. And so, like I said, we have to come back with what that's going to cost. I just want to get that out there nice and early. The next thing we don't want to forget about is our playground structures. Unfortunately, 9 of our 14 playground structures will reach the end of useful life in 2024. A lot of our playgrounds were put in 2000, 2001, 2003. So they're coming to that 20-year useful life age. Each and every year we do a very comprehensive playground inspection by a third party that lets us know the condition of our playgrounds. Each and every year we're spending a little bit more money on making sure that they're safe for our kids to play on. So we have to have some sort of strategy, whether we're putting money away for future years to start replacing some of these structures. And of course, we're going to be replacing them with accessible, and good for all age groups. Next thing on the list is a Cuthell Lane boat launch. We want to put a new dock at that boat launch. We have new docks at our other active boat launches, and the Cuthell Lane boat launches still has that old dock that it takes 4 staff and hip waders to put in and change the level depending on the water levels. So it's important that we upgrade that dock, and I know that that boat launch is used by a lot of residents. And the last thing that is kind of on the mind of everybody is planning ahead for the urban trail and what that's going to cost in staff time, materials, and everything else that goes with that. We don't have an operating budget for trails. It's kind of just meshed in there with our parks budget. So we want to make sure that if we're going above and beyond to create an urban trail, that there's money there for that. So I just wanted to have this slide in here about South Fred Community Hall and Public Works Garage. Like I said, the 2021 BCA identifies 3.4 million between the two, the community hall and the garage, in year-by-year itemized expenses over the next 10 years. In the budget presentation, staff have reduced the number to a bare bones 919,000 over the next 10 years for the 2 buildings. And that's where I talked about, we're looking at top priority projects to lower that number. In the 2023 budget, staff have identified an additional tax levy of 500,000 as priorities for replacing the metal slope roofs on both the hall and the garage. Given the low utilization and revenue rates versus year-by-year itemized expenses for the community hall, staff had previously identified the building and property for possible sale if to offset the purchase of 99 Advance Avenue. So if this money is to be spent on the buildings over the next 10 years, there will be a $2.5 million gap in funding, and both buildings are at risk to decline further. So we just want to get the question out there. Faced with a significant burden to the taxpayer at South Fred, now is the time to look at the future of the entire site. Of course, it has a ball field, soccer pitches, the Public Works Garage, it's got a playground. So we want to start thinking about what that site is going to look like in future years. I briefly mentioned utilization. So I just wanted to give council a nice snapshot of the utilization in 2022 of our community halls and meeting spaces. So the bar graph on the left shows 3 categories: the hours it was rented, the revenue it brought in, and the participants. We're starting to track participants more actively than we ever have, trying to get an idea of how many feet are coming through those buildings. You can see that the banquet hall at the Strathcona Paper Center is definitely our most popular. And then the lounges are a little less than the hall, obviously. And South Fred Hall and Selby Hall are a little bit lower than that. As we look at the revenue and the revenue alone in the pie chart to the right, you can see that between the 2 lounges and the banquet hall at the SPC, we're bringing in about 75% of our revenue. Selby Hall contributes, 20% of that, and then South Fred Hall and Roblin Hall bring in the remaining balance. We didn't put North Fred Hall in here because we're not charging the community groups that are using that space right now. We felt it was important to make sure that we get that building busy with community groups. Like the square dancers are there right now. I just got a call from them not too long ago. And so lots of community support for that building, lots of activity in it, but we left it off of this utilization charts just because we're not charging any revenue at this time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nicole just to talk about some of the funding.
So I'm actually going to skip ahead to the graph, and I'll speak to the graph which is on the slide previous to that. So what this graph is representing here, we are illustrating the comparison of the value of our projected facilities operating and capital needs compared to our current reserve balances with status quo contributions to those reserves. So when we look at the graph, the dark navy blue line that's near the bottom of the image, that represents the building and maintenance working capital reserve. So we should be trying to aim that working capital reserve, which is essentially our cash flow, to be about equivalent to 1 year of our operating budget. Then you'll see stacked on top of it a lighter blue line. This represents the two SPC reserves that are currently set up. So these reserves have been established purely for SPC replacement and needs. So as you can see on this graph, we are definitely missing a facility reserve. So this is where we need to get to. The shaded areas on the backside of the graph. So the gray shaded area represents where our operating budgets typically land. The orange area is our capital spend forecast without the SPC included. And then the yellow area on the top would be representative of what we need to spend on the SPC. So when we look at this graph, we can see that we definitely have some funding shortfalls. Right now, essentially all we are funding is our operational components of this, and we have a funding gap of our capital. We could very easily drain our SPC reserves, but that would only cover capital spending for 1 year of where we need to be. So I just want to paint that picture in that we need to find a way to increase our reserves, but also manage how we're going to fund our capital. On the next graph that I have here, so this here is representative of potentially what we could be looking at if, when the current SPC debentures come to maturity, which will be in the first quarter of 2024, if we took that amount of money that we're currently spending on those debentures and establish a building facility reserve, as well as put additional contributions into the SPC reserve within a 5-year time frame, where our reserve balances could be. Now, this is just kind of the happy path story. We're still really not talking about how we're funding the current capital need, but I wanted to start the discussion and the thought process around how we meet those needs of funding our capital requirements, as well as building up those reserves for future years. And just to add to that, so that is the end of our slides. We will be going through a series of these presentations around what is to be expected as we start to build our budgets for 2024. We will we'll be putting an end capstone on all the presentations with an overall reserve presentation on where we need to go to with our reserves, but there will be a component that's built into each of those presentations as well.
Okay, thanks, both Chris and Nicole. Does anybody from council have any questions with respect to the presentation that we've heard here this evening? I know it's quite preliminary, but it's really quite helpful from my perspective anyways, of sort of planting the seed and seeing, at least identifying where we need to go with these things, right? So is there any questions? Councillor Shank, yeah, go ahead.
As you're well aware, I could go on this topic quite some time, but provide all the facts. The cost of Roblin Hall, I'd like to see that what that cost. What you spent on North Fred Hall in the last 10 years, all right, and there's no revenue there. Have the true cost of what you spent in a lot of the other halls, all right, because I know we spent way over $2 million in the Roblin Hall. And when you look at what's the revenue is there, all right, and I know we had to do the bricks and everything else on North Fred Hall, and we're basically giving that out rent free. We have to be aggressive in maybe leasing some of the other opportunities and seeing what we can do to generate some type of revenue to offset any of the other costs that we have to put in. So this is very preliminary, but I could go on and on and on with all the questions that I would like to do as a business plan. Like you'd also mentioned about the Dorland Hall 2 propane, the one. Now, did you say there was a propane furnace in the office, and there was one in the?
No, so through your worship, right now we're burning oil. So there's 2 furnaces still, but they're both burning oil. So we would replace them with high efficiency propane.
And did you say that the location is there separate though?
So one furnace heats the garage bay, and then the other furnace heats the hall portion.
The only reason why, when I see $20,000 and you already have the plumbing there, I'm very familiar with that all. And I know what it cost me and the size of my house and the furnace that I have. That's being very aggressive on that, that's very much at the top end, because I didn't pay near that. So there's, I could go on and on and on, but this is for a later date. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilor Shank. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to the presentation we've heard? Okay, seeing none. Thanks, Chris and Nicole. Like I say, I think it's very helpful to get a good basic understanding of where we need to go with our budget in the coming weeks and months. So I'll look for a motion to receive the information of the pre-budget presentation regarding the future facility funding requirements. Moved by Councilor Shank, seconded by Councilor Martin. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up, we have deputations. Now, I don't believe, Madam Clerk, we have any registered deputations. Is there any deputations with respect to non-registered deputations? Mr. Wilson, do you have a deputation you'd like to do tonight? Well, and I think, John, you probably know the rules. We've only got 3 minutes, so we're going to try and stick to that as best we can.
I just want to talk about Springside Park and the walkway down through there. We have an awful pile of dead ash trees down along there. And a few years ago, we had a big one cut down by the fish hatchery. There's a whole pile of them up through there, but there's 3 or 4 of them hanging right over the walkway. Sometimes these branches come down. Somebody gets hit with one of them, you're going to be liable. So I'm just wondering if there's any way you can get them cut down. You sure now won't let me do it. So, and we have a guy that I want to give kudos to he's put a garden in right beside the fish hatchery, and it looks really good. And then you look up behind it, and there's all these dead trees laying all over the place. So it's just a thought, if you get the town, somebody to come down, there must be guys who work for the town that got the experience to do that. Stuff like that.
Yeah, thanks, John. And I know that the town staff are well aware of the ash tree problem. And like I say, you don't have to drive very far to see that there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ash trees. So, but thanks for bringing that to our attention. And I know that staff have made some notes here with respect to the ones at Springside Park.
I brought it up quite a few years ago. You were here. And are you guys still responsible for the boys coming in?
We are now, yeah.
Well, I remember when it was first on there, I've been up the river since before COVID. But if you come in at nighttime, you can't see them until you're right on top of them with a flashlight. The only reason we got it at the time, we had the depth finder. It's the only way we found the channel coming in on the dark night. They're red and they're green, but they're black at nighttime. Unless you're right on top of them. I suggested someone just go up and wrap some reflective tape around it. So when you flash the light down there, you'd see it a long ways off. So anyway, that's all I got. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. And again, I think staff has have noted what your concerns are. And it's interesting that you say that because and I know it's not our boy, but as I lay in my bed at night and I look out the window, I see a green flashing light all the time and it's a boy out across from my place. So I'm not sure what the regulations are, but I know staff has taken notes and we'll look into it for sure. So I think we're going to need a motion to note and receive Mr. Wilson's deputation for this evening. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I look for a motion for the adoption of the minutes for regular session of council on the 23rd of May, 2023. Moved by Councillor Norrie, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Correspondence for information. I know that there's been quite a pile of correspondence for information that has been sent out prior to this evening, and I know that the council has that information. Is there anything in that correspondence that somebody would like to pull out and have a conversation about? Seeing none, we'll look for a motion to note and receive the correspondence for information dated June 6, 2023. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Pennell. If there's no further comments, questions or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Correspondence for action 7.2.1. We have a proclamation request for Stroke and Aphasia Awareness Month. We have a recommendation that council proclaim June 23rd as Stroke and Aphasia Awareness Month in the town of Greater Napanee. I guess we'll put the motion on the floor and have a discussion with it if someone wants to have a discussion for it with it. Do we have someone to move that motion? Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. Is there anybody that wants to have any conversations or discussions with respect to the proclamation with respect to Stroke and Aphasia Awareness Month in the town of Greater Napanee? Seeing none, we'll call the vote for that. Then all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. The next one up is a proclamation request with respect to Seniors Month, which would be June of 2023. We have a recommendation that council proclaim June 2023 as Seniors Month in the town of Greater Napanee. We'll look for a motion to put on the floor and then we can have a discussion if warranted. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Norrie. Is there anybody who wants to have any discussion with respect to Seniors Month? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion is carried. Next is the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 137 Canada Day celebrations, outdoor patio and barbecue. We have a recommendation that council receive for information the correspondence from the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 137 dated May 24, 2023 regarding an AGCO temporary extension of premises application, and further that council of the town of Greater Napanee has no objections to the proposed temporary extended license area in front of branch 137 of the Royal Canadian Legion located at 26 Mill Street East in Napanee in order to host an outdoor barbecue for Canada Day celebrations on July 1st, 2023 from 11:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. So we'll look for a motion to put on the floor, moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Hicks. Is there any questions or comments or concerns with respect to that? Sorry, Deputy Mayor Cower.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. That looks like a good idea.
Yeah, thanks very much. Is there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business, Madam Clerk? No, seeing none. Committee reports. The Municipal Heritage Committee minutes. We have a recommendation that the Municipal Heritage Committee draft minutes of May 18, 2023 be received for information. We'll put it on the floor, and then if I believe Councillor Martin, that's your committee, if you can add to it if you wish, but look for a motion to note and receive that committee report. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. Councillor Martin, is there anything further you'd like to add other than what's in the report? Great, thanks, Counselor Martin. We'll call the vote. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Municipal Heritage Committee Draft Community Improvement Plan. We have a recommendation that council direct that the draft community improvement plan be incorporated into the 2024 budget process for consideration. We'll put the motion on the floor and then we can have a discussion if so desired. Moved by Counselor Pennell, seconded by Counselor Hicks. Does anybody want to have any conversations with respect to the draft community improvement plan? Seeing none, Counselor Martin, is there anything further you'd like to add to that? Thank you very much. We'll call the vote. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Staff reports, via train rail station agreement. And do we have someone speaking to that?
Through your worship, depending on the questions related to this report, I'm sure either myself or Mr. Pinsent can respond to those questions.
With respect to the rail train station agreement, do we have any questions for staff with respect to this? Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, worship, through you to Madam Clerk. Inside of this report, it makes mention of the foot traffic that has gone through this building, or the stops, I should say, and makes mention of train 651. Throughout this discussion, has there been any indication or any good feelings from VIA? Have they mentioned anything to you about bringing back 651?
If I may, your worship. So our discussions to date have simply been on trying to figure out what traffic we've had, the disposition of the train station to date. We have talked about the pricing structure in terms of sometimes it actually costs more to have the stop here than other communities. So I think what we're trying to do right now is determine the continuation of the lease, and then we're going to get into discussions of the pricing and future stops at that train station. How do we make it more accessible for Napanee residents?
Okay, great. Thank you. I would like to just make mention, if you could keep in the back of your mind, that it is important for 651 to reinstate, to have a stop here in Napanee. And for people who don't know about 651, that's a train that stops around 5:55, just before 6 o'clock in the morning, and will get you into Toronto bright and early in the morning. So it's a good stop for us here. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Councillor Pennell. Is there any other questions or comments with respect to the Via Rail train station report? Councillor Hicks.
So through your worship, I think it's a case of chicken or egg. So the numbers haven't bounced back to pre-pandemic, but we also don't have a train stopping here on a regular basis. So if the train were to stop on a regular basis, perhaps the numbers would go up. I think we really need to be pushing. Was Councillor Johnson not working on something with Via Rail during the last term of council?
So if I may, through your worship, really the way this came to a head was the issue when Chris had brought it forward in terms of the vandalism, how we're going to try and approach that, because the rent didn't cover the cost of the vandalism. I don't think we've really had any serious discussions with Via Rail, at least in the last couple of years, about stops functioning of that train station. We are now taking a more holistic look in terms of what it is, what does it represent to the community, trying to get somebody in there to use it such that it doesn't get vandalized. So this is more than simply a discussion about whether we renew the contract. It's about the future use of the train station in general.
Thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I mean, I think I have to agree with you. I mean, I like the idea of the increased usage and the visibility of the building, and obviously enhance anytime we have an opportunity to enhance the heritage value of the building. I think it's important. So I think we may be on the right track here. So if there's nothing further, we have a recommendation that council receive for information the Via train station agreement report, and further that council authorize the town to enter into a full-term renewal of the license agreement with Via Rail Canada with council to review and endorse the agreement prior to its execution. And further, that council direct staff to continue with the train station maintenance and security plan as presented in the 2023 budget. And further, that council support in principle the initial recommendations of the Heritage Committee as presented and authorize the committee to assist in the revitalization of the train station building under the direction of town staff. And further, that council direct staff to solicit proposals for alternate uses of the train station building that would be compatible with its continued use as a passenger stop. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. The Ad Hoc Trails Committee, and who is going to speak to that? Madam Clerk.
Through your worship, I suppose I can answer questions if there are any with respect to this report. This is a follow-up of the conversation that started at our last council meeting.
Thanks, Jessica. Does anybody have any questions or comments with respect to the Ad Hoc Trails Report before you this evening? Deputy Mayor Calver.
Thank you, Your Honor. As I sit on the Recreation Committee, I'm surprised that I wasn't named to be on this ad hoc committee. Can somebody explain that to me?
Yeah, I think Madam Clerk, yes.
So through your worship, one of our intentions with the way this committee is composed is to be very explicitly clear in the terms of reference and how it's laid out that this committee is not a local board that would be subject to the code of conduct and potential claims of conflict of interest. There are obvious conflicts of interest when it comes to this discussion. We are aware of them. I think it's important that the people with those conflicts be at the table and be part of the discussion. That's the only way we're going to get any collaborative solution here. But we also need to not have this thing be bogged down with potential integrity commissioner issues. So this committee has no authority of its own and no counselors sitting on it. It's there to help facilitate discussions and to have the key people in the room for those discussions and to do community consultation. And that was sort of the main reason why we don't have a counselor appointed to it.
Yep, Councillor Shank.
So it's the intention, then you're gonna have staff members sitting on this.
So through your worship, the staff members aren't sitting on it as in they're not like voting members. They would be there to provide resources, pass information to the committee that they need to do their work, present reports from the committee to council. Potentially members of the committee would also come to a council meeting to present that information to council. The committee reports directly to council, so it's not passing through another committee, which would potentially add like a month of delay time if it had to go be approved at the Recreation Committee and then be approved at council.
So so therefore you answered my question. Thank you. That's the reason why I feel that Deputy Mayor Calver, if you have to have one member of council or the mayor or deputy mayor, all right, sit there just so he can hear both sides, so he can give a report back to council. You can't just simply put staff and all right, and throw it into the mix also to get a report in. When you have a member of council there, you know what I mean? You can see if things are starting to go sideways or whatever, you know what I mean? I have more faith that everything's going to work better if you have a member of council, all right, just to make sure all parties are playing nice in the sandbox. Yeah, that's my concern is that just putting staff into the mix generally doesn't solve the problem. But if you have a deputy mayor, if he sits on the Recreation Committee, it's an ad hoc committee, they're going to give the report back to us anyway. So it just keeps a lot clearer for me. I'd have a lot more trust in the process if deputy mayor would be on.
Madam Clerk, was there any further information we can add to that?
Through your worship, it's council's decision, I suppose, but they want the composition of this committee to be this is staff's recommendation based on the conversations that we had after the last meeting, but council is able to do whatever you would like to do.
Counselor Hicks.
Thank you, your worship. So when I look at operational implications, staff from the Community and Corporate Services Department would be assigned by department supervisors as resources to support the work of the committee. I've read this twice and I don't see where staff is attending every meeting. I think the way I was reading it was this group of people have come together without any interference or inputs from council, at least publicly acknowledged, to come to terms and to cooperate with one another. And my reading of this is that they will have a staff person as a point of contact within the town of Greater Napanee to go to. We need to get pricing on this. What's the process for getting a quote? This is something that we need to have a cost on, but not necessarily sitting around the coffee table as part of the meeting. To me, ad hoc means it could be in someone's living room, it could be at the gas station, it could be while out walking on the proposed trail. So that's how I was reading it, not that there was actually going to be staff at every meeting. Am I wrong?
I believe you may be accurate. Am I correct in that, Madam Clerk? Again, I apologize. I have to look to you for this, so.
Through your worship, this is a new process for all of us. We know based on the turnout we had at the special meeting that there's gonna need to be different levels of community input for different parts of this conversation. And not all of it is maybe appropriate to have in a boardroom style setting, but that specific piece is not fully fleshed out in this terms of reference document. This is more meant to be a mandate of the questions council is asking this group to consider. We had initially assumed that there would be a staff person there at least to take notes, but I suppose, again, it doesn't have to be that way.
I believe that we're probably going to need at least some form of a staff person there too to take the notes. I'm guessing, and to facilitate some of the requests or needs that may have to be conducted, that we have the ability to do that. Probably the persons in the committee that don't, or the ad hoc committee that don't. But go ahead, Councillor Hicks, and I'll go back to Councillor Shank.
Through your worship. So I look at the names of those people appointed to the committee, and I would like to think that we have two doctors. Like we have business owners, we have, I believe Mike was a teacher at one time. They're all quite capable of taking minutes. I don't know, is this something that they're aware of too? I'm just, because when I see ad hoc, I don't think of a formal. They can present minutes. We can, I was actually going to ask that question. Is there the third Tuesday or Wednesday of every month there to submit a summary of what's been discussed in a progress report? Do the co-chairs present once a month at a council meeting? I don't know. That's a question.
They're going to present to council, I'm gathering, Madam Clerk, as they get the information that they're collecting. Am I correct with that?
Yes, through your worship, I don't believe that there is an established schedule. I expect it would be similar to the Waste Diversion Committee, who presents to council sort of as they have information that they want to bring to you, or as they reach a point where they need direction or authorization to proceed with a course of action. But I don't know that it's so structured as to say on the second meeting of every month, there will be a briefing.
Councillor Shank.
Like I said, I have no problem with the individuals here. You have 3 and 3 and you have both sides. They're all intelligent human beings. They're going to go ahead. But You have the urban trail, you have the other trail. They're gonna look at all the trails. They're gonna look at other things, the rails, what can we do? What can we do? The liability, you know what I mean? The insurance, this, that, and everything else. That's the reason why, you know what, let's look after it like any other committee. It's an ad, you call it a trail committee, all right? And have a member of council so they can go ahead and they can bring back, and this what's happening, this what isn't happening. I'm not saying that councillor or the deputy mayor ends up being the chair of it. I don't want that. Let the other ones, the way you have it set up, that they can be both co-chairs, the way you had it. I totally agree with that. But to have somebody there, all right, so that staff member can write those minutes and, and give it to, just run it the way it's supposed to be run and let it go that way. That's all I'm saying, is just run. I agree with the staff recommendation, but just add Deputy Mayor Calver in it if he wants to sit on that.
Councillor Pennell.
Thank you, worship, through you to Madam Clerk. Madam Clerk, could you remind us again what you mentioned about the implications of having a council member on here? I think we started off saying something about conflict of interest in the integrity commissioner and such. Could you remind us of this, please?
So through your worship, the only concern would be any council member who's going to sit on this committee should be aware that while the conflict of interest requirement to declare a conflict of interest and excuse themselves from the discussion does not apply to your citizen appointees to this body, it would apply to any councillor sitting on this body. And they would have to declare if they had a conflict and remove themselves from the discussion. I don't know if that applies to anybody on council. I know it does apply to the residents that are being appointed. It's just something to be aware of.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Nori.
Through your worship, just to keep it simple, I like the idea of a counselor just to be an observer. Sit back, don't even sit at the table, just so they know the flow, they know what's going on. They're not involved, but they're there. I'd like, and if someone's willing to do that as an observer, not get involved directly, then let them sit back. Then whatever information comes back, we know directly what's happening. So because it's such a big project and so volatile, I think we should have a witness, just a witness there, that's all.
Councillor Pennell.
Through your worship, there is a note in here that you, Mr. Mayor, is the ex officio on this, and I'm just wondering, is there a procedure for you to hand that responsibility to the deputy? And then therefore, he could become, just like Councillor Nori said, just an observer.
I don't think it's a question of handing authority over. I mean, I and Madam Clerk will, I sure clean this up if I go outside, but the position of mayor would be an ex officio on all committees, which this would be included in. I don't think there's any requirement to assign that to anybody. I think the question is do we want to put with the mayor position being the ex officio on all committees, is there a will to add a subsequent council member onto that committee? And that's, I think, where we're at. Am I right with that, Madam Clerk? Am I completely offsides?
Through your worship, that's correct. That's, I believe that's in your procedure bylaw, that the mayor automatically has the ability to attend any committee meeting, be a member of any committee. Typically, that's in the event that one of your counselors cannot attend, you have a built-in backup there. There's also nothing saying that a counselor any member of council can't show up at all of these meetings. They're going to be public meetings. So it really does come down to what council wants to do here. This is your committee that you've established.
Councillor Shank.
This is the last thing. Everybody here that's on council, mayor, deputy mayor, everybody here, you know what your code of conduct is, you know what a conflict of interest is, and you know what your integrity commissioner, you know what your integrity is, you know what the rules are. If you go in this bad faith, well, I'll hang you myself. So you just go in there, make sure that everything's being done correctly, and work along with the community and get these trails done, and that both parties are looked after and their concerns are addressed. That's all. You only have something to be worried about with the integrity commissioner or conflict of interest if you have one. And if you don't, and everybody knows what those rules are. And if you don't declare them, well, then you shouldn't be here.
Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through your worship, is the conflict of interest because I'm also on the rec committee? Or what if we had another counselor sitting just in the background as a bystander in the meeting? Would that make a difference?
Through your worship, honestly, it's just a question that comes up with every committee. I don't personally know what everybody's ties or holdings or interests are. It's just a general rule of awareness for counselors, and because this issue is a sensitive issue in the community, the question of conflict of interest has been raised, and we wanted to make sure we were giving you clear and solid advice on that.
Okay, thank you.
So just to recap, Madam Clerk, members of the community sitting on this ad hoc committee, there is no risk of a conflict of interest with respect to the members of the public. Am I correct there?
Through your worship, the requirement to declare and remove themselves from a conversation where there's a conflict of interest doesn't apply to your citizen members. Primarily because part of the whole point of having these citizen committees is to hear from people who have a special interest and have the relevant experience, and they, by virtue of having an interest in that committee, are going to have a conflict. That's part of why you want them there. You want their experience, you want their input, but we don't want to have them. They're not a local board under the definition of Municipal Act because they have no power to spend money or make decisions. All they can do is give council advice and recommendations. So therefore, those rules don't apply to them, because this is an opportunity to hear from those people.
However, if a member of council becomes a member of that ad hoc committee, that could or should that open up a door with respect to a conflict of interest or integrity commissioner, any of that fun stuff? Does that open the door up if a member of council sits on the ad hoc committee?
Through your worship, any person who wants to file a complaint with the integrity commissioner can do so at any time. The integrity commissioners, their first question will be, I know that they get some that they turn around and say, this isn't something we're going to investigate. It doesn't meet the grounds for us to investigate for these reasons. And then the case is closed. So it really would, as Councillor Shank sort of indicated earlier, if there's everything is above board, there's no real reason for a concern. I just wanted to raise that for council because this is an issue that's been under a lot of public scrutiny.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. My own personal feelings are that I thought we were having, the whole reason we were having the ad hoc committee, the separate committee, was to be distant from council. I mean, we could have just had the recreation committee do this otherwise. I mean, I thought the whole idea was to have like a citizens committee without any representation from council. That was my feeling on it, but that's just my own personal opinion.
I tend to agree with you, Councillor Martin, and we'll hear from everybody still, but I think we're trying to complicate this thing far more than we really want to. So Deputy Mayor Calver.
Through your worship. So it's got down here that Dave and Tom are going to be the co-chairs of the committee, which is great. It is equally balanced out as far as that's concerned. So who would be giving the report back to council? Would it be Dave and Tom, or would their report be going to staff and then staff event the report and give it back to council? If it's coming direct from the ad hoc committee to council, I have no problem having nothing to do with the ad hoc committee.
Madam Clerk, did you want to field that one? My guess is that probably the staff member would assist in the processing of the report. The report could be presented by either Tom or Dave, I would think, but they would probably be given assistance to process that. But I'll let Madam Clerk speak to it. She's far more learned in this than I am.
So through your worship, if it's important to council that they have that direct line of communication and that any reports be presented directly by those two co-chairs, I'm sure that's information we can communicate to the committee. If that is how council would like to see this done. Normally it would be a staff person doing that, but this is, as I said, new territory for us with this particular committee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Deputy Mayor Calver.
That would be absolutely perfect because it is brand new to all of us and it's something new to most of these people. I'd like to hear their words directly for, that way if we have questions, we're not going back and forth. If we have the people there taking the minutes, reading the minutes to council, that's a perfect blend. That way we can ask the questions. We're not wasting more time.
Yep. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Calver. Is there anything else? Okay, like I say, I don't want to complicate the situation that's extremely complex and complicated to begin with, but I think we've got some good people here involved in this committee that can make things happen, and I believe in my heart that they're going to make this thing happen. So we have a recommendation that council receive for information the ad hoc trails committee report, and further that council adopt the terms of reference for the committee as presented, and further that the following individuals be appointed to the committee: Dave Milligan, Mark Hamill, Sean Davey, Tom Tassell, Liz Tassell, and Mike Sewell. And further that Tom Tassell and Dave Milligan be appointed as co-chairs to the committee. We'll put a motion on the floor and we'll see where we go with it. Moved by Councillor Shank, seconded by Councillor Martin. Is there any further comments, questions, or concerns with respect to our discussions here? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Budget Amendment 2023 Capital Replacement of Sidewalk Machine. And who will be speaking to this? Nicole. Sorry, Nicole, go ahead.
So through you, your worship, I don't really have much more to add to the report. This budget amendment originally was approved in the 2023 budget as a transfer to reserve. So essentially what we are doing is redirecting that from a transfer to the reserve to using that to fund the replacement of this machine.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Is there any questions or comments of Nicole? Seeing none, we've got a recommendation that council receive for information budget amendment 2023 capital replacement of sidewalk machine report, and further that council approve the capital expenditure for replacement of a sidewalk machine, and further that council approve the transfer from reserves for the cost of the asset, $200,000. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, go ahead, Councillor Shank.
Mr. Mayor, the went ahead and the contribution reserves from tax base was approved from the 23, but it was already in the tax base. This is the same topic. Nicole, like last meeting, we spent $100,000 out of the reserves for the downtown surveillance cameras, I think it was, and $31,000 for the funding of the downtown. All right, the board. Angela sits like, could I just like to make sure that you keep and we keep abreast of every line item and that we get it seen quarterly of what we've done gone into the reserves for, so that to date we were going to get the matching of for the grant for the 100,000. Reason why you put the 100,000, I understand, but as time goes by, you know, I just want to keep the accurate record so we know exactly what we've taken out of the reserves, you know, and then we get it at a quarterly saying, okay, guys, this is how much you've already dipped into it.
Absolutely, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So this specific amount hasn't actually hit reserves yet. So this was never inside of the reserve. The other 100,000 for the downtown cameras, that will only be touched if we get the approval for the grant. So at that point, we have it earmarked right now in our tracking, but that will not be touched and unless we get approval through that grant process, and then we would come back and report that to council. So right now, all that we have essentially taken from the reserves is the money for the downtown area.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Councilor Shank. Is there any other questions or comments? I think we've got a motion on the floor, so we'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. New business. Is there any new business? Seeing none? Notices of motions. Does anybody have any notice of motion? Seeing none, statements by members. I have Deputy Mayor Calver and I have Councillor Pennell. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Worship. Mine's really quick. I just want to say thanks to all staff that was involved in putting up the 3 flagpoles at 99 events. They look fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Pennell. Deputy Mayor Calver.
I'd like to thank Linda Warner. She provided us, all the council members, this book from Napanee Beaver. It's Lennox Nattington book. It's through the Napanee Beaver, and Linda Warner donated these from the Beaver to all the council members. So thank you very much, Linda.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Mayor Calver and Councillor Norrie.
I just want to say thank you and kudos to our fire department for helping with the wildfires up by Pembroke. I have a relative that's a part-timer and it was quite a learning experience for them. And now the training and the camaraderie they had is excellent, and the work they've done been excellent. So I just want to thank them and be safe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Norrie. Are there any other statements by members? Councillor Hicks.
I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Norrie said. Much appreciation goes out to all of the firefighters, especially the ones that went from Napanee. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Hicks. Is there anything else? Seeing none, CAO's remarks.
Just quickly, Your Worship, thank you. Council stole my thunder in terms of the firefighters. We had a rotation, I think, of 7 or 8 firefighters since Sunday morning. I think most of the activities are done now. We will be working with the other fire departments through mutual aid to see if we can't get some of those expenditures back. So that's the follow-on work. I would like to thank both the infrastructure staff and our parks and recreation staff and students in terms of getting our flowers up in the downtown core last week. They look good. And we're in the process, I think, this week or early next week of getting the planters out downtown as well. So that will even help making Napanee look very beautiful in the spring and summer.
Thank you, Mr. Pinson. Closed session. We'll look for a motion to move into closed session. We have a recommendation that council resolve into closed session to discuss a matter related to a potential disposition of land, section 239-2C, a labor's relations matter, section 239-2D, and instructions for negotiations to be carried out by the municipality, section 239-2K. Look for someone to move that motion. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks, and we'll see you soon. Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to look for a motion to rise and report from closed session. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Deputy Mayor Calver. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. I'm going to report that council rise and report from closed session, and further that all recommendations made within closed session are hereby adopted. I will report that in closed session tonight, council approved the closed session minutes from May 23rd, received for information a confidential staff report regarding the listing of 45 commercial court and gave direction to staff, received for information the confidential CAO report regarding a potential negotiation and gave direction to staff, and received for information a confidential HR report regarding a labor relations matter and gave directions to staff. And I'll also look for a subsequent motion to be passed that no further offers be received on or before June 14th, 2023. Council authorized staff to accept the offer for purchase of 45 commercial court as presented in the confidential staff report of the general manager, community and corporate services, and further that council direct that such sale be finalized by bylaw passed in open meeting at the soonest possible date. Moved by Councillor Pennell, seconded by Councillor Shank. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next up is the forward calendar. I know we all had an opportunity to see the forward calendar. Is there any discussion or comments with respect to the forward calendar? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion to confirm the proceedings. Bylaw to confirm proceedings of the Council of Corporation for the Town of Greater Napanee. Moved by Councillor Hicks, seconded by Councillor Martin. Bylaw 2023-45 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its regular session held June 6, 2023, read a first, second, and finally passed. All in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried, and a motion for adjournment. Moved by Deputy Mayor Calver, seconded by Councillor Hicks. If there's no further comments, questions, or concerns, all in favor of that motion? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, folks. It's been a good, productive evening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, I guess. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye.